everyone. We are wrapping up our budget cycle here, at least our work on the budget. And so I think what we want to do here is let's kind of go through the letter and go through points that people have, points that we have for discussion. Just to frame this in terms of what we've done in past years, I think there's a couple of ways to approach our letter and to approach any changes that we may have. We can do two things. So we can go for a consensus letter where we all, eventually vote and adopt and agree on what we have, or we can look to incorporate non-consensus opinions as well. So I just want to offer those up as options. I think we chose to go with a non-consensus option last year and just voted to approve it. All right, so let's dive in. Alexander, are you able to share and scroll through?
Yeah, I was just going to, we did have
Yeah,
public comment as well.
Oh, excellent. Let's go there.
Right. And I also wanted to recognize that we have some different staff support from PPS leadership. So I think we can get Leslie and Dr. Adams. Would you like to do a quick introduction, and then we can shift over to public comment and then get into the report?
I'd love to. Good evening, everybody. Good to be in space with you, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing. I hope some of you may remember me from our work session. My name is Renard Adams. I'm the Chief of Research Assessment and Accountability with the district.
Hi. I'd like to echo the thanks for all that you're doing. And my name is Leslie Odell. I am the Interim Chief of Staff.
Thank you. And then, as I acknowledged last week and over email, Myung Lee is on leave, and just so folks are aware, he will be heading back to the district, but is away on vacation right now. So I'm going to go ahead and shift towards public comment. I will start at the top with Anna Marquez.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I'm going to read a statement. So my name is Anna Marquez. I'm the parent of an Ockley Green Middle School student, and I'm also a member of the PPS Racial Equity and Social Justice Community Advisory Committee. I'm here to ask that the CBRC continues to include foundation policy reform in its report to the board to highlight the importance of allowing all schools to work together to raise funds and align state funding advocacy. The CBRC needs to continue to show its support for foundation policy reform because our district is in crisis when it comes to equitable outcomes for all students. We, as an entire district, need to unify and collaborate to support each student's needs fairly. Reforming school foundations is the first step in helping the entire PPS community see each and every PPS student as our students collectively. We can invest in each and every student's future by providing equitable and similar experiences, no matter what side of the river they live on. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could begin to eliminate the stereotypes that exist in the district around the wealthy and poor schools? What if schools, families, educators, and students were respected in the way they all deserve? I want to see the disparities eliminated for our entire Portland Public Schools community. And when some schools are able to insulate themselves from cuts, it's both unfair, unacceptable, and contrary to PPS's stated mission. So let's move forward to support one another as a larger community to commit to true equity as well as sustainable funding options for each and every student in our district. Please continue to include in your report to the board a recommendation to reform the PPS Foundation policy so that fundraising practices truly reflect PPS's stated values and mission of social justice and racial equity. We've waited for over 25 years. What are we waiting for? And that's it.
Anna.
Thank you.
Okay, we have comment from Suzanne Clark.
Can you hear me? My name is Suzanne Clark, C-L-A-R-K-E, and I'm a parent of a student at Roosevelt High School. I helped form the Reform PPS Funding Group over 4 years ago. I'm here tonight to ask the CBRC to support foundation policy reform now. Not doing so would send the message that funding shortfalls are of greater concern when they impact our wealthiest and whitest communities. I understand why parents support foundations. I started the foundation at my daughter's elementary school in 2014. The school had just lost its Title I status from the prior year. And at that time, some classes in the school had over 30 students. PE, music, art, library were all on the chopping block due to a budget shortage. I'm sure that Roger would back me up on this. These budget cuts are nothing new. When PPS parents ask what they can do to help, for over 20 years, the only message that PPS principals and administrators and now librarians, some librarians have told parents is that they can write a check to the foundation. So I started one. However, after attending meetings with foundation board members from foundations that had been around for a long time, it became really clear to me that the system was not intended for my lower SES community, which also did not receive a parent fund grant. My school did not have the ability to raise enough funds to purchase one FTE. And even if it did, all of that time and effort wouldn't have even helped the entire school. I was confused about how we got here, so I did some research and I learned about the QEM and Measure 5. I immediately turned my energy to working for Measure 97 in 2015, which would have raised $3 billion for Oregon schools, but it didn't pass. And then the Student Success Act, which passed in 2019. I thought this type of action would do more than writing a check to my daughter's school after a big party, and it has. The Student Success Act raised over $2 billion for Oregon schools, and back then, people said it would never happen. As you all know better than most, PPS has serious funding issues. If nothing changes, in 2 years, PPS will be facing exactly what Salem-Keizer had to do this year, and we'll be laying off hundreds of teachers. This policy reform would allow a 1-year transition period, allowing foundations to pay to hire teachers next year as they do now. This is not being rushed. After which, all private funds raised for FTE will go through a district-wide foundation and be distributed based on the recommendations of a parent committee. That committee would be representative of the entire district. More importantly, it would create an advocacy arm for building support in Salem, something we've never had. It's a great first step to repairing any damage caused by the strike, and it will unite us as one district for the shared goal, our shared goal of improving the outcomes of all students. I want to thank you guys, the CBRC. You're doing a really great job, and I hope that the board takes to heart your recommendations. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you for being here. Our next comment comes from Oscar.
Hi there. Oops, sorry, my camera's a little fuzzy. All right, awesome. Can everyone hear me? Yes, okay, awesome. Good evening, members of the Community Budget Review Committee. My name is Oscar Ponteri. I'm currently a first-year student at Claremont McKenna College, but more importantly, I'm a PPS alum who spent 13 years in our wonderful schools before graduating from Franklin just last June. I'm joining you today from my dorm hall during finals week, taking a break from studying, to urge members of this committee to support the foundation reform in their pending report to the board. As a student at Franklin, I noticed the inequalities in our school district. While we were busy fundraising by creating class competitions between underclassmen, upperclassmen, I knew that across town, Lincoln would host large one-night fundraising events in fancy hotels with high ticket auction items. However, I did not know the engine behind these disparities until I wrote an article on foundations for Franklin's newspaper later last spring. Digging into the data revealed a system that perpetuates our district's inequitable outcomes. In 21-22, 8 schools raised more money through foundations than the rest of the district combined. At these 8 super earners, on average, just 15% of their student body is historically underserved compared to the district average of 33%. It's no coincidence that these schools are whiter and wealthier because many of them draw the majority of their students from neighborhoods that historically excluded people of color through the practice of redlining. With this in mind, I ask you, the members of this committee, are you comfortable in your report to the board saying that you, quote, encourage the district to develop strategies to decrease inequities long-term in one breath while upholding the current foundation policy, which is closely tied to systematic racism and inequity in another? And that's a quote taken directly from your drafted report. After years and years of this committee urging the board to consider foundation reform, now, with a viable alternative that promise opportunities for continued funding, the finish line is finally in sight. Now is not the time to turn your back on equity. Now is not the time to turn your back on racial justice. Please support foundation reform and cross the finish line knowing that you helped create a better reality for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you for being here. So that concluded the public comment for folks who showed up in our Zoom meeting. There, I also wanted to point out that I've linked to and included on the CBRC website is a written comment that was submitted. So that concludes what we had for public comment for tonight. Stefan?
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just had some thoughts about the always comments. So wanted to earmark that.
Go ahead if you had any follow-up.
Are we doing this while the public commenters are still here, or is it just, or is it a public meeting? It is. So yeah, I just want to say, like, as I generally agree with this. I think from my perspective as a budget review committee, there's a couple of things that I have struggled to see in the budget, and that's one thing is like where these funds come in, and how they're distributed. So understand, like, I don't think we can do this year, but it's more like some sort of my perspective on this is if we had that kind of information, I think we could say something more specific about that. And that related to that, it's like I talked to people who are supporting or organizing foundations, and we have an argument that most of the money goes to a district, and that removing foundations would essentially just reduce a PBS budget. I'm not saying that's right or that's my position, but I think like that's kind of like the conversation that's out there, and I think like in order to have a good conversation around that, it would be helpful for me at least to have that kind of like information that is, as I said, is like how much money is collected, and how this money is distributed by schools, what kind of difference it makes. Is this a trivial amount of school budgets? This was an important amount of budget, and so these are things that I think I would love to address.
Thank you, Stefan. I think we have a limited amount of time with everything on our agenda, but we do, in case you're curious later, we do have a row within volume 2 that shows the FTE that are funded by foundation. And those dollars are also reflected in volume 1. So I can highlight them if it's interesting now, but I am looking at the clock and aware that we have more. Luke, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. I think that this is especially pertinent given the recent library assistant cuts, because only 2 schools were able to fund the library assistant position after the district made the cuts, being IW Wells and Hosford. So I think, if we're talking about equity concerns surrounding cuts and foundations, this would be, an especially good time to see that reform, and might be something worth including in our report.
Okay, do we want to you want to kind of jump into the report and just review the sections, then we can go through this. See if there's
Mariah,
any.
sorry to interrupt. I also we have the local option levy data available for
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
And that is usually more of a technical piece. And so I was wondering if we could share that first and just kind of get it out of the way, and then we can focus the rest of the time on the report. Does that
Sounds
work?
great.
Or
Mhm.
okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and screen share what we've prepared and just make sure there are no questions about what we're presenting here. And then Mariah, last we spoke, I think that you had agreed as chair to review and then input data in the template that we had not updated.
Yep.
So
and I got that data. Thank you.
okay, great. So if you've already reviewed this, Mariah.
Yeah, but I think it's worth doing for the group.
Okay, great. So what we're presenting here is for our prior school year, 22-23. We have included the audited enrollment and then the actual revenue received for local option levy. And then we provide a comparison between what would our staffing look like without the levy and then with our levy. And so this analysis found that for 22-23, using actual enrollment and actual revenue receipts, that we have funded 922 teachers on the levy. And then this analysis also provides the current year as an estimate. We're obviously within the current year. And so these figures will change as information is refined over time. And the estimate this year for funding for the number of teachers is 802. This also provides a by school look at how the local option levy has impacted our school staffing. And Juno, let me pause for you if there's anything else that you wanted to highlight from your team's analysis.
Yeah, so one thing that we do want to note is that we fine-tuned our estimate for the total cost for a teacher, and we refined that by focusing on Gen Fund and by focusing on those who have teacher in their title, not just all PAT members. And so that's how we came to that 922 FTE number. We are going to see a pretty stark decrease in the current year. So in fiscal year 23-24, that primarily is going to be due to two factors. One is the decrease in local option levy revenue that will be coming in, as well as the cost, the average total cost of a teacher going up based off of the new labor agreement. Does
Juno,
anybody? Yeah.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
I just attended one of the levy support events. It's certainly important to our funding here. And they are claiming that in going forward, the levy will cover 605 teacher positions. That is a big difference. Is that because there are such significant raises in the coming years, or?
Yes. Again, that's the same two factors that reduced current year. It's just going to compound. So our estimates for the next year, the proposed year, is 106 million for local option levy revenue. So it's about a little over almost 3 million less. And the cost of teachers will be going up as well. And so those two factors are really compounding this issue.
So I guess I'd like to ask staff and the committee as well, would you be comfortable with a line in there in the letter? I know this has been pretty much a form letter, but just offering a little bit of qualification why there's been a change, because I think anyone in the public might wonder. especially with the number that's kind of being shared around. I see Roger.
Yeah, I'd support doing that. Juno used a different term, but basically you're saying the collective bargaining agreement settlement has greatly affected the total number that will be funded this forthcoming budget year. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, as well as the decrease in revenue overall. And that 600 kind of estimate number for this next 5 years is to make sure that, you know, as the years go on, not just next year, but this the number of FTE that the local option levy can provide is going to get less and less as salaries continue to increase year over year. And so if the revenue coming in from the local option does not kind of keep pace with that, we will kind of continue to see that decline. So that 600 whatever the 600 number FTE that is being proposed right now is to kind of is kind of like that bottom line, that number that we want to hit even in the 5th year when it's going to be really hard to hit that number. Yeah.
Appreciate the explanation. I see Grace.
Hi, I'm fine with putting something in the report you're going to write. Just, you know, balancing it. It's the same thing that we're seeing in the Gen Fund and everywhere else, that our costs are increasing faster than our revenues.
Yeah, great. Tess.
Yeah, Mariah, I agree too with you and Grace and Mr. Roger. Yeah, I think we should include that.
Fantastic. Staff, would that be most appropriate to include a line or two about that in the levy memo, or would that be better to include in the CBRC's main report?
Well, I think we have some additional content that was also suggested around the upcoming renewal. So, you know, I think it may be more visible. I'm actually not sure. I think you want to make sure that it's visible to the community, and because this is typically almost a template where we are filling in some blanks, maybe it would be more visible within the report, or it could be within both. Director Sullivan, I think you had your hand up first.
Yes, I think it is in the report, isn't it? On page 3, number 2, costs rising faster than revenues. It states that pretty well, although it does say that they think next year the 3% from the proposed budget isn't enough. I'm gonna have to go back and check and see exactly how much more the contract is next in the following year. But I think it does a pretty good job of explaining why we got less money.
Yes, Patty, we're talking about the local option levy report, not the CBRC report that you're looking at. So we're talking about adding that explanation for
I
why.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is explained in our regular report. Good.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Roger, did you have another comment?
I just would encourage you to put it in the local option report.
Okay, Mariah, do you feel, do you want to draft the language for that?
I will, if the committee's comfortable with me drafting that language, not right this moment. We could do that either towards the end of the meeting, or if we lack time, then independently. But the spirit of that language would be acknowledging that the support created by the local option levy will be reduced in coming years, both because of reduction in that support and the increased cost of teacher salaries established in collective bargaining.
Sounds good. So I'll let you, we can move through the report.
Fantastic. Well, we begin with just a quick preamble, a reminder of the board goals, and just a note that this past year that we've looked at in this report, really kind of two board goals, the third grade reading goal and the early literacy competency and the graduation goal. We have not delved into fifth grade math and eighth grade readiness this year. I think that's fine given our time constraints and given the fact that by and large, these changes are pretty sweeping and affect all four of the goals. So I think that's reflected there. Increase just the size a little bit on that. I'm on a small laptop right now. Thank you. Apologies.
Did that change the size if I move it? I don't think it does,
I'm
right?
I'm not seeing a document now.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna restart.
I can just speak to the kind of the next pieces. We want to acknowledge the need to focus on, kind of the core needs of our students and also reducing academic and racial disparities. And that smaller class sizes are an important piece of that. If you want to page down a little bit. And noting that with structural costs, so there's a question about how would class sizes go up if we had fewer students? Class sizes are likely to go up as the report notes to some degree because we have kind of fixed structural costs and also labor costs have increased. So that's why we are likely to see larger class sizes. It's actually hard for me to believe when I look at how full some of our classes are physically. So we've looked at kind of the structural changes. We note that there's an uneven progress, that we've seen not a drastic decline in the graduation rate, and some of that may be kind of left over from the pandemic, but that is not evenly distributed over all schools, or it has a racial component as well. We've taken a second to note in this report the impacts of basically the strike here on instructional time and on the budget, and that those are likely to impact student needs. I think the point there was just simply noting that between that and using up our spare days in the calendar, our students are not getting the full number of hours. I understand that at the state level, we've received a waiver, so it's not problematic for the district, but I think it's problematic for our students. Moving on a little bit here, and please, if you have questions, yeah, Grace, go ahead.
Sorry. Ah! I'm two places trying to work on my computer and my phone at the same time. Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the comment I made when we were working on the draft about, I think I would just either I read it too fast or there was missing a word, because it sounded like it was written as we were missing 900 hours of instruction. I was like, wait a minute, that's how many hours we're supposed to have. So I think I just read it too fast. So that's why I flagged that earlier. So yeah, it's very important to show that instructional piece is part of our current climate.
Yeah. If you want to scroll up, I believe I reworked that language a little bit. Okay, it's just down on the next page. Which leaves some K through 8 students short of the 900 hours required. So if we think that we need to clarify that further, I can, but the idea was that short of not necessarily 900 hours short. I didn't want to specify how many hours people were short, because it kind of varies, as my understanding, based on grade level. Moving on here, we're noting again the trend of declining enrollment. We base that on PSU data that forecasts, family enrollment rates, demographic trends, and so forth. And just that has a long-term cost where we have these, buildings and maintenance costs on our books. Kind of continue here unless there's questions. So recommendations. So that we continue outreach efforts. And I would just say we should all be a part of the outreach efforts. We're all involved in the system and care about it. And continued advocacy, of course, at the state level for funding. I think we can also, going on, we note that costs are rising faster than our revenues. We note some of those costs here. And I think the point to me to diving into this is when I was just a member of the public looking at PPS's now it's nearly $2.4 billion budget. I didn't understand why there wasn't money and what that money went to. And so I wanted to break it out here in terms of what's actually available and what the costs are that are pulled in that. So we note in here things that, obligations we need to keep, like PERS, and so forth. We also note in here that the projected budget increase is smaller than the negotiated cost of living increases and so forth. So we may run into bargaining costs again in the future. We almost certainly will. And we have in here for our recommendation simply that in the climate of unknown, so the district's model as presented, my understanding of it was that we are drawing down our reserve. And please correct me if I'm wrong here, 2026, if there were no changes in funding, that would draw our reserve to 0. So while we want to be cautious in terms of staff reductions and things to meet that, we don't want to count on the legislature. What they're going to do and the mood of the public next year is a bit unknown. So we better advocate hard. That's my editorializing there. We can move on.
I guess I think I wanted to pause here just because we've had this, framed in the public conversation. So in future years where we've discussed drawing down our reserves, we've also discussed action taken on the expenditure side in terms of our planned expenditures to avoid that. So I think I see this as suggesting that the district is relying on potential revenue that may not appear or be there, but we've discussed reducing expenditures to avoid drawing down our reserves.
I'm sorry if I was incorrect, seeing a budget or a projection with a zero-based reserve. That was my recollection in my notes for a past meeting.
I think we're suggesting there are two trajectories. So if we do not take action on the expenditure side or we do not receive revenue, then we are drawing down our reserves. If we do take action and reduce expenditures or we receive more revenue, then we can maintain our 5% reserve. Stefan, I see your hand.
Yeah, you say that the projection doesn't take action on expenditure side, but I think my own guess there is that it might already do that. And my take on this projected budget for the next year is that it's some sort of a balancing act of raising that issue while also keeping things somewhat look fine. And then how it's going to play out, it's going to be next year. So I think that sorry, that's just my interpretation of it's hard to, it's hard to make full sense of it because we are just aggregate numbers.
I don't have an issue with this. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't.
I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think you might say what you say is like it's perhaps a little more general, right? I mean, like essentially, like the district doesn't necessarily assume higher increases. It shows that there's some changes that need to happen for the upcoming budget. Or so is that something we should highlight? Does that make more sense?
What do you think, Mariah?
I mean, I wrote it, I'm comfortable as it stands. I will turn this over to Roger.
In that we were asked last year, what is our position about reserves? I think we do have to address it, and I would encourage the committee to take a position that we don't endorse going below the 5% and whatever that means, encouraging the legislature to increase its funding, or we look to cutting elsewhere within the budget. But the reserve policy was adopted since I was on this committee, and we were the initiators of that recommendation that I would encourage us to at least maintain the 5%.
Could we scroll down? Yeah. Okay, so I think we have that in there, if that means sure. Moving on here, we talk about deferred maintenance. Roger, I think we may need to update these numbers. I can get them if we don't have those. I think I've left in the portion from last year.
I basically, I didn't touch them because, Alexandra, you might want to include that paragraph that you gave me, that the staff reported what they intend to do this next year. I'll jump ahead in the addendum that I've submitted to Alexandra, because I go off the committee. I recommend that a whole variety of organizations lobby hard to not only revise the GEM or QEM, but to establish a first priority of education funding for pre-K through 16 at the legislature. Recognize, I sat in a call recently with the PTA where outgoing Senator Dembrell spoke about all the many demands that are placed on the legislature, and believe me, they have no small cup of tea to deal with. And but who knows, maybe they need to increase taxes, I don't know. But needless to say, we're not the only district that's hurting badly.
I can resend the content on the deferred maintenance.
Okay. If you want to, or either of us can input that information there, but I think no surprises. We call for the district to continue this. It's part of our, I mean, I just want to note, like, school buildings are community hubs as well as schools. Reforms to the budget process. CBRC, we're supporting the district's efforts to, make our processes more transparent and accessible to the general public. I think we've had that. We've had more public comment this year. So again, we request that PBS share the individual school level data. We talk about the public would benefit from that, also from the school continuous improvement plans. We ask for continued application of the racial and social justice lens and encourage the district to continue embedding equity. Nice, Patty.
When you say sharing school level data, do you mean what's in that volume 2, or do you mean something more than that, or different than that?
Well, this might be my personal crusade, but I personally have asked for and feel that the district should email out the one pager to each of the schools and their PTAs so that people are actually aware of it, because I know it's publicly available, but
Oh, the
I
one
think
pager that's in the,
yeah,
their-
and maybe a summary. It's just hard to access, to access it.
oh, yeah, I guess
200-page
everybody
document.
has it on their computer, but it's really hard to read that way. Okay, I
Yeah.
see. So just to send out their individual schools.
So
Okay, thank you.
I can remove that if no one else feels the same way, but
I wouldn't remove it. I'd leave it there. In fact, it really what you're suggesting mimics an effort that was done for a few years, where an executive summary of the proposed budget was disseminated to schools and so on after the adoption of the final budget. But that's gone by the board in recent years. But I do think schools need to be apprised as to what's going on at their own school, and then and reference where it's found in volume 2 so they can see what is done with all the other schools. The Title I, the CSI, TSI schools still continue to get remarkably higher funding than does the Lincoln High School that was cited earlier. They're about half of what many high schools receive. So
thank you, Roger. Is there a specific revision that you'd want there? Okay, I see Grace.
I'll take a hand at trying to draft something.
I'm wondering how the committee feels about adding a recommendation on the section of the reforms to the budget process to encourage or ask the district to, I think we're asking for more information in general on the budget. And one thing that would be interesting to see either at the committee level or wider public level is if they continue the efforts of surveying leadership, to see that survey data and to understand that more at not such a high level of what was put in the budget statements, but like, what were the trends and what did they see? And also I would be interested in, having them ask the questions of throughout our report, we're talking about direct service staff, asking questions of direct service staff too, about their thoughts on the budget. And I want the committee would be interested in asking for or encouraging just more surveys of staff like they did this year with the school administrators.
So am I reading this right? Am I remembering that we have this? So sorry, we have this in here as one of our recommendations, share the school level budget documents. Do we just want to add a line in here and administrator surveys? I thought we actually had this in the document already.
I remember that as a comment or a suggestion, but I mean, this is where it was. So
Okay.
should we add?
accepted that change, and apologies if that got lost. Yeah, certainly. And Dr. Sullivan.
Yeah, I'm just still a little bit confused about what that says. Is it saying, it says we'll repeat our request from last year. Does that mean it didn't happen this year or that you want it
Correct.
to happen again? I really thought they sent everybody out by email the board books. I mean,
So they do. They do send out the superintendent does send out the board books.
Yeah.
What the specific ask there is that they pull out, I would say the executive summary. I would leave this up to staff what they want to do, but the relevant school information.
okay, so that people don't have to find it themselves.
I mean, that would increase accessibility.
It sounds like we're hiding it, that we just sent it all out. So I don't know, just to somehow state it that,
We could just say it plainly.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, the district does.
Or I don't know how to say it, but it just sounds like we requested it last year and it didn't happen. But I know it's all out there for anybody to see. So,
Alexander, would you mind editing to say we request PPS share
to share
school summaries as a pullout from the budget document with the individual schools
yeah, that makes more sense.
and PTA. Would that cover it? That was the intent there.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Okay. No, we'll just delete the rest.
Yeah.
I thought I saw another hand. Touching.
Oh, I did raise my hand a minute ago, but you already reworked the sentence, so it's all good now.
Should I capture the bullet point, Mariah, that you had intended to accept from Grace around the school leader? Okay, I'll type that. We recommend that the district share survey data in more detail, or
Yeah, just administrator survey data. I don't imagine we're going to be doing more employee surveying within the constraints. Roger, jump in.
Yeah, I wonder whether Grace doesn't agree that it seems like schools are being inundated with multiple surveys, and but in the years that I've been on the committee, it seems to me when we do get public comment, it's at the end. It's when we're dealing with a proposed budget and so on, and there's a paucity of misunderstanding or lack of knowledge of what true data is, or how even the budget was constructed, and perhaps this solution is, or this suggestion is a solution or works toward that, but I'm not confident it will be. But anyway, let's leave it in.
Mariah, are you on mute? It's a lot of buttons.
Yes, if we want to page down a bit.
Okay, I just wanted to highlight so folks were aware that I also, Grace, you had in your verbal comments just now, you said you suggested we continue to survey PPS communities on the budget. I think that was essentially what you said, and so I included that here. I want to make sure that's okay.
Yes, for some reason I'm having a hard time seeing the report. I think it's my computer connection. That as you're editing it, I have another copy on another tab.
Okay.
I think my comments is as a PPS direct service provider. It would just be nice to be asked, you know,
So including direct service providers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So kind of a reiteration of things we've said before, align with board goals, continue to recruit and retain Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks and staff. We're asking for opportunities on the 8% staffing model. And I think we will probably have some discussion here. Okay, Raja, I see you here.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a quick question about the remaining balance of ESSER funds and where is the ESSER funds going to be earmarked, and if the committee can make a recommendation of where those funds could be earmarked.
Thank you. We are still planning to spend down ESSER within the current fiscal year. So we are not planning ESSER dollars for the coming school year. And Juno, let me know if you have any other information that might be helpful on that.
Yeah, you are correct. There won't be any ESSER dollars at any point next year. We are looking to spend it fully within this fiscal year, correct?
Okay, thank you. I thought we had until September. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. But I think though that for our main purpose is whether or not the dollars are spent on ESSER or Gen Fund, it's still district dollars that are being spent on those services. So if we are able to spend down ESSER in this current year, then that just means those are Gen Fund dollars that we don't have to spend on those items this current year. And that means we can use those Gen Fund dollars next year to support whatever that is whatever needs that we have next year. So it's kind of all the same pool of dollars in that sense. And for accounting purposes and for projection purposes and estimating purposes, it's a lot easier if we just spend down ESSER now and not have to account for another 2-3 months next year. It's a lot cleaner fiscally if we just spend it down this year and have a little bit more carryover from Gen Fund. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So basically you have to spend the funds this fiscal year. Do you know where it's going to be earmarked for this particular fiscal year?
I don't have the exact details. Kristen, who is our grant manager, would have those details, but we can get those details for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Luke, is your hand up?
Yes. Okay. Surrounding the foundations discussion that was brought up in public comment earlier, and Alexandra, I also just sent you an email with some statistics that are kind of in regard to the foundation, if you'd like to present that as well. But I just wanted to very much highlight here, I'm not sure who included this language in the presentation or the recommendation, because I personally don't remember it being discussed within CBRC, but there is definitely some issues regarding the direct correlation between unequal foundations and the income bracket of the school and the area around the school and the races that are represented in the school very often. And coming from Franklin, coming from a school that barely has a foundation at all, I believe it's inactive this year, but I think putting any language supporting the continuation of foundations is definitely questionable, especially given that it is up for a board vote pretty soon. So I would like to reconsider putting that in the report at all. And potentially even putting it to support the other argument.
5 p.m. happy hour. Okay, let's see if we got Dash-L here.
Yes, thank you for that, Luke. I think I had some similar concerns last year as well, that I brought up, and about the inequities of the foundations. And at that time, if I remember correctly, the response was something like that really wasn't CBRC's area to have input in, and how we came back around to that is, I don't really know what the resolution was on that, but I agree that that language either needs to be removed or changed in some way. But those inequities are just growing at a rapid rate. And so I think we really do need to revisit that language.
I think the thought behind leaving the current policy untouched is that we are in a very difficult budgetary environment. I'll just share that my daughter is in a first grade class with 31 kids and needs reading support. And I know that they get approximately 2 hours a week of extra support for that class that they would not get because there was some fundraising involved, of which 30% gets distributed to the district.
Am I
so
correct?
it just seems like a tough time to remove that funding when we haven't fixed the larger funding. I think we can all agree that what we really want is for the state to adequately fund our schools so that we don't have to rely on charity at any level.
Am I correct, Mariah, that you are an Alameda parent?
I'm an Alameda and a Beaumont parent. Man.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to point out that like Alameda has an $100,000 foundation for this fiscal year. Franklin's foundation is $500.
Yeah,
and
also
that
like
is, and
sure.
Let me just and that's a very small for Franklin. That's not much, but that's reflected a lot more in schools across the district. And I think there's a graphic that Alexander's displaying right now that shows the direct correlation between the historically underserved races in the school population and the amount that they're able to raise through their foundations. So, it may be an unstable time for district funding, but all that funding is doing is protecting the schools that are able to pay for it. And, we can still fundraise if we were to transition to like an equitable foundations policy, but we wouldn't have to just allocate it to the schools who will most likely be experiencing the effects of these cuts the least.
Missy Dash-L?
Yeah, and I think it also exacerbates even larger issues. So what's happening is basically the PPS foundations are perpetuating the same things that we see with funding for nonprofits as well. So it's that same kind of setup of these larger gaps of disparities between these pockets of wealth, and where you can be able to distribute some more of those dollars. And for those schools who don't get to be able to have access to those, it still does limit those opportunities. So again, agreeing with Luke that we do need some sort of policy in place for that equitable distribution of dollars, because yes, we do need to call on the state to do more, while at the same time, though, we have to find a happy medium for the students to be able to benefit from these philanthropic efforts, because this is all also underneath PPS as well.
I want to recognize Dr. Bernard Adams.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am wondering, I appreciate this conversation and debate. I'm wondering, since there is actually a policy on the record and up for a vote that would change this, I am wondering what the tenor is about the report, given that in that conversation around the policy, I'm thinking about counting the board members' votes, right? And then Director Sullivan is here. There were a couple directors that sort of opposed foundation reform, and then there was not a lot of there was not more than 4. And so I'm wondering, what is the right statement that the group wants to make, knowing that this is likely to change at the next board meeting, quite frankly. I don't want, what I would hate to see is us or the members of this team sort of going at each other around something that may resolve relatively quickly. So I just wanted to throw that into the space, and I'm sorry. I know this is your meeting. I just wanted to, just as an observer, share that.
We do have the option of staying silent on the policy and removing that recommendation. I see hands up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I don't think anyone was going at it, but I think it's creating a healthy discussion around what we all prioritize and want to see in the schools. And so just want to make that clear that I know I can speak for myself, and it sounded like Luke the same, that was not the case, but just really trying to figure out that resolution for some equity statements. And it's great to hear that there might be a resolution to that soon, so we can revisit it then, and perhaps in preparation for that conversation, we could just offer some suggestions.
Yeah, it will probably be resolved the same night that you present this, so don't want to spend too much time.
I'll just jump in here. What if we keep the first part of the recommendation, that is that the board figure out long-term strategies to enhance equity?
Yeah.
Is there any disagreement around that statement?
I do think it is a good opportunity to perhaps support like equitable foundation funding here, because I mean, just given the fact that we already had the language kind of, you know, in the document, and that it is going up for a board vote next week, you know, if we do have the power to influence, you know, the vote on it, I think that is a great use of CBRC's efforts. Especially, I mean, you know, it might not actually impact anything, but if we are going to be able to sway votes, maybe we want to sway them in the right way.
I'm not sure if Dr. Adams still has his hands up, or if Grace, you want to jump in here.
I'm so sorry. I didn't remember to lower it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my perspective is that historically, my recollection is that in quite a few of the CBRC reports, the message has been concern for foundation funding exacerbating inequities. And while I completely understand, and you know, like you said, Mariah, we all agree that kids in schools, all of them deserve more than they're getting right now. I'm not comfortable with the draft with that in there. I would support some sort of a statement around encouraging the district to look for strategies for long-term fundraising that would equitably enhance, you know, the budget for all Portland Public School students in a way that's not sequestered to separate schools, because we're Portland Public Schools.
Where is that? What page is that statement on right now?
This is you want to display that? Roger, go ahead.
Okay. I believe I'm correct. Some foundation support goes to providing foreign language trips for language immersion classes. And so the purposes of different fundraising efforts have varied from school to school. as Luke is aware, at Franklin, the largest amount that we ever raised foundationally there was about 50 grand, and that pales in comparison to lots of schools. And but also as I've engaged Director Sullivan last meeting, over the last 50 years or better, Portland Public Schools has directed its individual student funding so it favors funding of Title I and TSI, CSI schools over others. Hence, you do have a differential of Lincoln High School funding their students. That if you look at that page in volume 2, they get about 6,600 per student, and whereas you start looking at Roosevelt and so on, and they're 14,000 per student, and so on. So you come to recognize why schools have had these foundations and so on. I don't know what the solution is. I did note that in the presentation given us tonight by Ms. Clark, she did indicate that there was no change recommended immediately, that was ongoing consideration for revision, and that I could go along with, I think, and somewhat echo what Grace just said.
Well, in the spirit of kind of continuing through our report, do we want to look at revising this language? We could take out a statement of support and leave in a statement of equity. There's 2 sentences in that piece, and we could keep the first sentence.
Could we add a sentence after it, just specifying that we encourage the district to work towards creating the district foundation for funding staffing through fundraising? Because I think that's the biggest piece is that right now foundations can fund staff.
Okay, if we
we're not
want
saying
to
that
add that,
foundation
then
can't raise money, but funding staff specifically.
yeah, if we want to add that, then since it doesn't seem like this is a consensus report any longer, then we could keep in both recommendations. So then we could simply note, as we have in past years, that our community has multiple views on this, and we could keep in both. Do we have thoughts on the direction we want to go with this? We could keep in the phrase, we encourage the district to develop strategies to decrease inequities long-term while providing families and communities the opportunity to support their schools.
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
So the language here is we encourage the district to develop strategies to decrease inequities long-term while providing families and communities the opportunity to support their schools, period.
I guess I'm just confused on like what exactly while still providing families and communities opportunities to support their schools alludes to. I feel like it's kind of vague.
Yeah, the opportunities to support their schools, I think leave that in, but be specific about whether that's allowing for funding staff.
How about we just edit this to the words opportunities to support schools? Would that remove the concern here? I see Stephen, sorry.
Yeah, I had the same. So Portland Public Schools. So when it's much enough, but it'd be my suggestion. That's good.
So we want to delete in light of looming budget shortfalls and the specific foundation policy. We don't have.
We could remove that language if we're trying to move to a consensus report. That's up for option here.
I concur as well with just leaving schools instead of their schools.
Okay, we could do that.
Okay. So
yeah, I'd like to, I think, I mean, if not even if just we're going for a consensus report, but if it was a non-consensus report, I would still say that we should have both perspectives in there, and make it, clear who they're attributing it to. I wouldn't be comfortable with that language being put under the general name of the board.
do we want to capture the divergent views on foundation here?
I don't feel the need to. I feel like we could leave it as a general statement. We've got a lot else to deal with in this. So if this is the only thing that we want to hold up on, or
Stefan, I liked your to support Portland Public Schools. I like that.
that pass muster with most of the committee.
Yes.
All right. So I'll give a minute for any further comment. All right, diving into the direct service budgetary decisions that directly impact board goals. So we talk about equitable and targeted direct service staffing allocations. We note that staff has made an effort to minimize the impact of reduction and support on students and core operations. That's hard to assess, but I believe that's always the effort here. And kind of continuing on. So cuts to direct service staff. We go through the reductions here. And I'm looking at the percentage decreases and particularly highlighting library and media services. If we want to go down to the recommendations. So recommendations are prioritizing student-facing positions and continued analysis of contracts for services that may be redundant work. Analysis of investments in direct and indirect non-student facing services should preclude further cuts to direct service student-facing positions. That's our recommendation. We've asked to reconsider library staffing cuts at the K-5 level and to maintain present hours on library services by reducing budgets elsewhere. I would actually propose, I love our library. I think I would just edit that to say maintain present service levels.
So take out the caveat of just the K-5, or
I
guess K-5 is the only area is K-5 the only section that got cut?
They will be cut at every level, and I think we should change the language.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't know if library.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know if library cuts is specific enough. I believe the position that is mainly being cut is the media assistant. But I guess there's cuts across the board as well.
Yeah, Luke is speaking to the fact that Franklin is losing its media assistant. So we're not losing a librarian, but we're losing a key person in the library. And that's because that position doesn't fall under the word library, but falls under classified staff unrepresented.
Dr. Adams, I think you had your hand up.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify, and we shared this last night at the board budget hearing and work session, We did not make any changes to the high school library, teacher librarian or library assistant. Excuse me, let me put my camera on. I'm sorry about that. We did not make any changes to those allocations at the high school level. However, the library assistant position is a position over which principals have discretion. And so at some high schools, what we're seeing is that principals have made different decisions around that FTE amount and how they want to use it. So I just wanted to add that context because I don't want, I wouldn't want it to be just characterized as a district cut at the high school level when that wasn't what we did. Thank you.
Director Sullivan, I think you were next.
Yes, and I was actually going to say the same thing because I was corrected last night in that it wasn't like we're saying, okay, the principals have a certain amount of money and they have to decide where they're going to put it. And they've got lots of decisions to make. So in some cases, that's where they've decided to stay. So it's not as if we're saying we're going to cut all library aides at high school.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but was it not a position that was previously funded by the district and it was that funding was cut, not necessarily the position? Am I correct?
Yes, that's what I understand.
The district cut the funding for the position and then left it open for the schools to be able to fund that by themselves.
Well, we've had to cut funding, period. Well, this is, I wish Myung were here because he's the budget person that really can talk to this. But as I understand it, the principals have so much money to spend and they have to decide where. And it was less, and that was one place they probably cut other places too that don't show so much.
Thank you, Director Sullivan. I can share a little bit. Thank you for that question, Luke. At the high school level, there was a reduction in a pot of funding for FTE that's called discretionary, and the library assistants do fall into that funding pot. And so because there was a reduction there, we have seen some building leaders make decisions about whether or not to fund that particular position of a library assistant moving forward into next year. That would be an accurate assessment. Thank you for the question.
Okay, so to clarify, there was cuts to the spending in general from the district level.
Yes, there were spending cuts at all levels of school. Those spending cuts, however, were differentiated, right? So at the elementary and middle school level, the district said we are not funding library assistants at all. At the high school level, we said you have this pot of money and funding for FTE called discretionary, and we're reducing that for budgetary reasons.
And I was just going
So
to
I have a
comment.
question about that because in the budget book, in volume 1 in the budget book, in the informational section on school staffing, there's a specific bullet on page 211 that says in order to meet the budgetary reduction needs, that library assistants at all levels were eliminated. So it says elimination of some allocations in order to accommodate the strategic investments in school staffing noted above. Discretionary support allocations to middle and high schools, and then it says library assistants at all levels. So that makes it pretty plain that the funding for library assistants across the board was eliminated.
What I would say, Ms. Groom, is I would need to double check with the budget staff and other leadership staff. That is not my understanding of what the cabinet decided. But I understand the impact. What I want to say is all these details, I don't want to, cause murkiness. In reality, there are some high schools where library assistants are not being carried forward into the new year, and I don't want that to get lost in the conversation. And I appreciate you pointing me to that. I actually didn't bring my budget book home today. I had it with me last night and left it in the office. But thank you for that. We'll look that up and touch base with the budget and cabinet team.
I've got my book. What page did you say?
211.
Oh, 2.
211. It's at the top. There are 3 main bullets of how the focus of the reduction was. Number 1, class size threshold increased, and then allocations of staff to 0.2 increments rather than 0.5, and then elimination of discretionary support to middle and high schools, and elimination of library assistants at all levels.
Oh, yeah, so the discretionary report, well, plus discretionary report. Yeah.
Right, they got a double whammy.
Oh, geez. Oh, man. Oh. Okay, well, I guess Dr. Adams and I are on the same mistake or misunderstanding. Yeah. Or the book's misunderstanding. I don't know. We'll try to figure it out.
Luke, I would encourage you to talk to Sonia Harvey at Franklin. But she was instrumental in helping this principal make decisions. So.
Stefan, I think you have your hand up next.
Okay, do we have further questions about this we can answer right now in terms of the library? Like in our budget document? Nancy Grace.
Yeah. Yeah, this isn't about library, but just about the section in general. I liked how we, highlighted the noticing that they attempted to not make a big impact on as big as it, to save student facing positions basically is what they were trying to do, and recognizing and encouraging that continued focus. I also wonder if we wanted to highlight, because it was in the executive summary, that they also did not close schools, like entire schools. And if we want to share that as a piece of, yay, we didn't close any schools.
Are you suggesting that's within one of these larger areas?
I think it's right under the cuts to, let me look at my draft.
The section where we were focused on library was within cuts to direct service staff.
Right. And it says I guess the preamble to that section says that continues the trend of reductions to student facing position. Oh no, where did we put that? Where is that? Where it says we recognize.
It's the first point there. We're down to number 2, so just scroll up a little bit. And
Okay.
I'll just say on this, I'm not sure that we have taken or discussed as a committee a position on the district strategy other than reducing the impact to students. And I'm not sure how it's going to pan out in coming years. We could praise them for it this year and then see, I don't know how it's going to pan out. Roger.
I guess I concur with your observation, Mariah. Grace, I think it's laudatory that we're not closing schools in this proposed budget, but boy, I think that's very likely in the future. So I think maybe we best be silent about that.
And maybe, I mean, I think it's been discussed in public meetings, and so maybe it could be about the manner in which CBRC recommends the district pursue that work. If they're,
I think we'll have the opportunity to discuss this in depth next year. I mean, we have
Yeah.
harder cuts next year.
I had a question on this first recommendation, if I can. When it's prioritizing student-facing positions and continued analysis of contracts for service that may be redundant to work assigned to district-funded positions, this is in the context specific to this header, district service staff.
Direct service staff, yeah.
Yeah. It just, this is a very strong statement. And my reading of it, I feel that could stand on its own, and this could potentially be a separate bullet point, or were they strongly related?
If you think it adds clarity, then let's put a period after positions and begin a new
You can see how it looks.
bullet point. I think the spirit of our support here is to maintain as much student support in the classroom and, you know, kind of those wraparound student services as possible. It's getting hard. All right, do we want to continue on? I think we're around bullet 4 or 5, or number 4 or 5. See if we can get through this, get everybody out of here.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed here allocation additional cuts to non-direct service administrators. So
that was actually a leftover from last year. I don't have a particular position on that. I think it's a little redundant. Does anybody have an objection to removing it? Okay, hearing none, I think it's captured above. Okay, so looking at differential staffing allocations based on increased student need. Our recommendations here, CBRC reiterates the need for accurate data on investments and tracking that over time. I think the district is attempting to do that. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading this at the scale.
Can you see it now? No, it stopped the share. Okay, let me try again. Is it increasing when I do that?
Quite a bit now.
Yeah.
Okay.
We might have to take it down just a notch.
A little bit.
Can you not see all the text? Okay.
I apologize that I'm not on my desktop where I could enlarge this myself. So we're asking for accurate data over time to talk about the return on equity investments. We recommend that PPS track and assess how the allocation of school-based intervention is to the schools of the highest need based on MAP testing data impacts outcomes. So that's changed this year. We recommend the district work closely with school administrators during the time of, page down a little.
Just hovering over this sentence because I see.
Oh, do we have a drop? We have a.
Yeah, the subject of the sentences. Or
Which, I think this one was edits it. Maybe that, yeah. And I think what we might want to conclude, Alexandra, with this meeting with is approving any
any
kind of copy
edits,
grammar edits that are needed for clarity.
I agree with that, and I'll just flag everything that we see that needed some copy edit. Um, Did you want to move down to the enrichment summer or summer after school, outside of school hours?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. So we support district's effort to close educational gaps with special programs, including summer programs. We are acknowledging this year's CBOs, request for increased fundings, and continuation of funding from SIA funds. Yes, Grace.
Sorry, I missed my moment.
Oh, do we need to go back?
Just a little bit, yeah. The one about it looks like there's a dropped sentence, at least on my old draft, but the right before recommendations about equity allocations. Yeah, right there, something
Yeah,
about.
we've had some edits.
And I think the point that I was wanting to bring there was that just encouraging the board to, with this shift to all high schools getting equity allocations as a percentage of their, I think, combined underserved students. I think that's how they do it. To look at the overall equity allotments, to make sure nothing funky is happening, like Lincoln is ending up with more FTE than, a school that has higher combined underserved students. Just to look closely at that, because it's a big change.
On a per student basis. Yeah. Okay.
Is this a recommendation or?
I think it was an observation here.
Okay. But I'm hearing Grace.
I'm fine with whichever way makes more sense. Observation or recommendation. Yeah.
I mean, I think we'll know more next year. Yeah, we certainly want to follow that for sure.
Okay, I think for time, we'll go ahead and move on.
Okay. We note here the change from an 8% to a 4% change in equity funding, but also there's that basis change that's a part of that. So we're on to summer after school and specialized learning programs. We talked about CBOs, a request for funding, or the continuation of funding from SIA funds. We have a question here about the reduction in TAG funding to match projected enrollments. So hopefully that can be answered. So we recommend that the district provide programming for students not qualifying for SAA because they scored below the 10th percentile. So it just is another way to capture students who are struggling and to provide support for them. CBRC supports the continuation of funding, and we have an extra space there for CBO programs with a record of strongly positive educational outcomes. I wonder if we might want to, yeah, I think we should say that. And we recommend the continuation of TAG program funding at a level that matches current enrollment needs as TAG provides engagement. So if we've seen a 66% decrease, then that funding would decrease accordingly. Investment of so we're questioning the instructional coaches and professional development time. We know that it's important, but we ask that the board evaluate this investment against basically the potential use to support student-facing staff and or reduce class sizes. So our recommendation here is prioritizing class sizes and current student support positions over additional instructional coaches. We make an exception for early literacy interventionalists, providing direct service to students and coaches, providing support to educators, just because that's a really critical and early board goal that really all the others build on. We support maintaining social emotional supports here. We acknowledge that the district is currently not funded to meet all those needs. And we've requested clarification if there's a minimum counselor FTE for K-5 and the 6 through 8 schools. That was not clear to me either in reading that closely.
It's this, we request clarification if there is a minimum counselor FTE.
Yeah.
I don't want to put Dr. Adams on the spot, but maybe we can look for this information during the meeting. And you know that, sorry, go ahead.
So I don't know if this is a.
Sorry, go ahead.
So we're just wondering if, like middle schools and high schools, there's a minimum FTE for K through 5 and 6 through 8 schools. So we're noting that PPS is moving from a 0.5 to a 0.2 allocation for a lot of staff. So the idea is probably you can split or share staff across schools a little bit easier, which I understand that. And so we're just wondering, like, could you have a 0.3 counselor? Could you have, or I guess it'd be 0.4, 0.2, whatever.
So thank you for the question, Mariah. What I can share is that information is outlined in our staffing guidelines and core program handbook, if I could speak. And we have been rounding up. So there are instances, for example, in the core program handbook where it calls for a 0.5, for example, allocation. And because we're allocating in 0.2, we've been rounding that up to 0.6. I can work with Alexandra to make sure that you all have access to that document. I think it is available, but I want to make sure that it's somewhere in a drive where anybody can access it, because I'm not the owner of the document.
Okay,
Yes,
so I think what I'm hearing, I mean, if I'm reading I don't have it in front of me, it's page 214, whatever it is.
Yeah,
It looks like high schools of over 600, and I don't know if there's high schools of under 600. Everybody has at least 1.0 for a counselor. I'm just wondering, are we under that for K through 8?
Yeah, because on page 213 at the top, it said counselors are allocated using a ratio of 335 to 1 based on total school enrollment, and allocations are rounded to the nearest 0.2. So I guess the question is, like you said, Mariah, is there a minimum allocation? Like every school's getting an instructional coach, is every school getting at least a 1.0 counselor? Or is
I
that...
think it's completely fair to ask that question. I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but I'm happy to research it. I know that doesn't help you with finalizing the report. I want to acknowledge that because I don't have the answer right at this moment.
So, I'm actually going to recommend that we remove that. I really think it's a question for staff rather than a recommendation. If we want to make a recommendation that schools have at least a 0.5 counselor, then I think we should just come out and say it, you know? Yeah, we have, if possible, reduce the counselor to student ratios to no more than 1 counselor per 100 students. So that is 1/3 of what we currently have. That would be a dream come true for most schools. Do we want to revise any of this just to note, just to ask for a no less than a half-time counselor at any school? Or we want to leave it alone? I'm looking at our committee.
I mean, I think it's, like you said, it's a dream. We can recommend it, doesn't mean it's going to be the reality, but we could also just take out the observations about the requesting clarifications. And, you know, we're already saying that we know we don't have the money and we know that the needs are intense. So
That makes
both,
sense.
both things can be true.
Juno.
Is that, sorry, is that 100 per one student aligned with, is that aligned with the QEM, or where is that number coming from?
I think it just came from our committee work. We didn't look at the QEM. That would be a good thing to add. We could just say that, reduce the counselor ratios no more than the QEM recommends.
Yeah, we should find out what that is. I think the 100 dream.
It recommends 250 students per counselor. So I mean, I do get the hope to be aspirational, but we are, a budget committee. I feel like we should also be realistic. And we're not even meeting the QEM right now. So, 1 per 100 seems a little, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with just saying, if possible, match the no more than the QEM recommends.
Just for clarity here in a budget document, how about we recommend a student to counselor ratio as recommended in the QEM? Sorry, that's recommended twice.
So I just wanted, for a point of clarification, I know that the question was asked earlier, are there any schools that have less than 1.0 FTE in counselors? I can say that it looks like every school has at least a full 1.0 counselor FTE.
Thank you for that. Sure. All right, moving on, special education changes. So this highlighted portion is just straight up pulled from the district's budget, like the summary. It is not my recommendation or anything. It's just their statement. It was hard. What I will say is it was hard to determine what was going on with special education with the information provided. I see there's an increase in school psychologists, speech language pathologists, and teacher FTE. It's not clear what's happening to other special education staff. I don't know. Does anybody want to weigh in on this?
Well, I'll only reiterate what I said at the last time we met. It's my understanding we're in the process of moving to individual schools providing these services, whereas they used to aggregate in given schools within a cluster to provide the services. And the last time I asked a question, Myung said, well, the very next day, the district was going out to the community to explain what their proposal is, and so I don't know anything more than that.
Well, in light of this, I think we might just want to note here that in light of significant changes to special education programs, CBRC, I don't know what we want to say, would like to continue to track this next year, would like to see outcomes from those changes.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I think we want to see the outcomes of the changes. I don't know how to weigh in on them right now.
I was just looking at the memo that was shared by special education specific to staffing and shifts. And it's not clear from that memo, and I wasn't able to decipher it in the budget. But we have a line in our draft right now that says there is significant cuts to Also notes reduction of classified staff for special education, but it's not spelled out in the special education memo about those cuts. They did cut the feeding team and the adaptive PE team. I'm forgetting what AT stands for, but another acronym. But it doesn't specify the like paraeducators that were reduced.
Okay, well, it seems to me like our recommendations here can stand to review these cuts to better understand it next year and to monitor the shift. So let's move on to early literacy. I want to make sure that we get through this. Grace has kind of led the charge on early literacy with some expertise in this area. Or a lot of expertise in this area. Do you want to talk us through?
Sure. So we've got, laying the groundwork that literacy is foundational to all the goals, and that the board's goal is to close the opportunity and outcome gaps in third grade reading between students of color and their white peers, and that it's a good thing. We went from having a bullet saying we weren't focusing on early literacy last year to, hey, there's some early literacy changes. So we're encouraged by the investment of the early literacy coaching. I think that we need to change that, add to that early literacy interventionists and coaching. And maybe put a period after that. And then we could just add that we still question the lack of high dosage tutoring. The learning acceleration specialist, that was the only show in town for intervention for reading and at the district level last year, but this next year it's going to be those literacy, those 7 FTE academic interventionists. I don't know, we could still encourage the district to focus more on early literacy with that learning acceleration specialist position. Right now, learning acceleration specialists only work with third grade and up, not early literacy. So as a district, we have added through the early literacy grant from the state, that budget earmarked 7 FTE in the form of interventionists, so direct service support to K-3 emerging readers. And I think a little bit lower down, maybe in our recommendations.
Patty, do you have a question while we're on something?
Well, just what Grace was saying, I can't remember the name. There was a lot of training, wasn't there, in phonics and early reading? I can't remember.
Right. I think that's going to be continued with the coaching positions. Okay. So they have, as I understand it, from what I understand from Elizabeth Martin, they have put together sort of a suite of services that districts or that schools can apply and qualify for. And they have to kind of like do the whole shebang. They get the direct service, learning acceleration support that's moving about as needs change. It's like get in, get the kids where they need to be, go to the next school, that kind of thing. And then also they get the coaching of the staff to continue that.
What was the name of that?
Science of reading.
Science of reading training. Yeah.
Introduction.
Okay. So they're continuing that, as I understand it.
Right. And I think it's going to be rolling out so they've been doing the letters training.
Letters.
And right. Yeah, but this is going to be, more comprehensive with more staff focusing on early literacy at the schools that I think both ask for the help and show from their scores they need the help.
Okay, thanks.
So, yeah, so more direct service FTE to K2 would really make a big difference in meeting that third grade reading goal, and maintaining or reducing class sizes for the lower grades, especially like you mentioned, Mariah, 31 first graders, and especially without another adult in the room, that's not the greatest environment for early literacy. So this, I think this was from last year too, the maintaining the 1.0 allocation for small group instruction for EA, for kindergarten classrooms at schools serving a population of 40%. I don't believe that they did anything to that. I think we could still say that we want to maintain that. From what I have seen in maybe the percentage went higher. Do you know, Dr. Adams, has the percentage gone up from 40% to a higher amount, or was that the equity funding that the percentage went up?
So I honestly don't have the answer to your question, Ms. Grimm. I'm sorry.
It has stayed the same. That is staying the same.
Thank you, Leslie.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so maintaining that and expanding the high dosage tutoring to serve students starting in the third quarter of kindergarten instead of starting at third grade. You know, if we have intervention materials, which I think we will now because we're getting it with the early literacy grant, then we could be using that in high dosage tutoring for younger students also. And yeah.
Kind of scrolled past this part, Grace,
Yep.
where the discussion on library services and
Mhm.
then the recommendation here around staffing to the QEM. So I just wanted to call that out since I scrolled through it so quickly.
Sure.
I think we're all on board with that recommendation around libraries. I've understood our discussion tonight.
Yeah, and I guess I think in our last meeting, we discussed this as being couched within early literacy and wanting to elevate it or move it somewhere else in the report. If I'm tracking from last meeting.
I suppose we could take that section and move it up where we talk about a recommendation for library support earlier.
Is it in the cuts to direct staffing?
Direct staffing, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to just make a note on that and make that administrative change later?
Yep. Okay.
I don't know if this is possible, but I did leave a comment about potentially mentioning the library staffing recommendations in the overview of the report as well, specifically because we do mention, I believe, cuts to direct student positions in the overview. So like it might be relevant to just include that in there because it's a specific example.
Mm.
We're at time within this meet. And we are really close to kind of getting through all of the content.
Would the committee be willing to extend 5 minutes to get through and finalize here? I can't see everyone.
I see some thumbs
You
up.
want to throw up a hand that you don't,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
High school graduation was the next section.
And I know Taz led on this.
Yeah.
I can read through on it, recognizing the district is trying to continue to improve on budget goals, reduce disparities and inequities. And based on graduation rates, we're down for underserved populations. We've noted that earlier, note that here again. And that the evening scholars staff were funded on ESSER and will continue on the general fund. So the recommendation here is for more information on the multiple pathways to graduation, alliance, and reconnection services, essentially kind of wraparound graduation options. And reduction in central office expenditures. We note that central office expenditures have been cut $55 million in 3 years, which is huge. And wonder if these have, what impact these are having on student success. I mean, probably slower responses from staff and other things. So a review of central office spending cuts. Again, we're just dealing with hard and deep things. I mean, as the interim superintendent noted. So kind of in our closing, focusing back on our values here, providing rigorous, high quality academic learning environments that are inclusive and joyful, and disrupting racial inequities to create vibrant environments for every student to demonstrate excellence. I think our final kind of piece here is just reiterating that maintaining or reducing class sizes by increasing teaching staff and giving students more individualized attention will have a positive impact on all students, but particularly on those who are struggling. And we note that we need to respond to financial crises. Kind of this, some of this is just recognizing the points above, kind of summarizing, recognizing the points above. And we think staff are working with us on this process. And I do want to thank our staff for that. So that concludes our letter. So to sum up kind of this conversation, I think we've worked through all of the main points here. Alexandra, let's if we can, I would suggest a couple of votes here. We would vote to approve Alexandra to make any kind of edits for clarity or grammar in our reports. I would like you guys to approve for a portion to just note that the levy funds, as we discussed earlier, are going to essentially have a reduced impact on the number of positions that they can fund. We'll include that in the report. Those are the only changes from its current form that we would anticipate. Any further commentary here? You guys have borne with us for a full 2 hours.
This was a lot.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot this year, and we've had a
Yeah,
lot of quick
I
changes.
just want to thank everybody. Yeah, thanks staff, and definitely thank you, Mariah, for all your work in drafting the report. That was a lot in a short amount of time.
All right, and we're going to turn right around and present this really soon.
On the topic of presenting, we had discussed preparing slides, and I would still be happy to take a pass at doing that and offer it for your consideration. So just pulling out those high points. So we can opt to not use it or use it, and I'll go ahead and share it with you all tomorrow. I'm seeing some head nods, so I'll go ahead and do it.
Okay. So I'm going to have to rely on either Roger or Alexandra or someone with the institutional memory in terms of how we have authorized this letter to send to the board.
In the past, we agreed on the process where how it would come together ultimately. But I do like that, Mariah, I'm hearing you kind of suggest that there is a vote on this, and with kind of administrative or editorial, like not editorial, but copy edit changes. Yes. So I like that personally, but okay. What do others think?
Also move and you get a second, Moran, let's go.
Second, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
but by a show of hands, perhaps, all in favor, show of hands. And we have a quorum here tonight. Let's see, do we need to hear from anybody who's, oh, there we go. Everybody's got it.
I see 7 hands. I think that we're good.
Okay. All right. Okay, we've approved our annual letter to the PPS board and we'll be presenting. That's on the 7th, if I'm recalling.
That's right.
Okay, see you all there.
Yep, it's an agenda item on the regular board meeting, so I'll send you all more information so it's really clear, but you can join on Zoom or you can join in person at PEC. And it'll be a component of the regular meeting, so we'll have CBRC members at the dais in the boardroom. I hope as many of you are able to attend in person or there. And let me know how else we can support if you need any other preparation time or anything like that.
Oh, and just take a second and say thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Director Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Adams, and Leslie Odell, and all the other staff, Juno, who have assisted us this year and pulled a lot of information together. And we recognize that we've scrambled this past 10 days to pull a letter together, but you all have had to move very quickly as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, good night. See everyone Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Jeez.